Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Passionate Talk. This is episode number 3. I am your host, Gary Karp, and today we're going to talk with Andrew McGregor. Andrew is the owner of The Hermit's Lamp, a metaphysical gift store in Toronto, Canada, and we're going to chat a little bit today about how getting hit by a truck when he was 14 spurred his insatiable quest for knowledge and the discovery of his why. We're also going to find out what's in heavy rotation on his devices, what he's listening to nowadays, his love of surrealism and surrealistic art, how he creates psychic portraits, and this is really fascinating. It really was fun listening to him describe his process here. And we're going to talk a little bit about the truth of free will and what it really means to be free. So right now, sit back, relax, pour yourself a cup of coffee or some tea, and get ready to listen to my interview, which is really nice and really quiet because after 40 years of living on top of people and having bowling balls rolled across my head, I'm ready for a little peace and quiet and not a lot of people. So that's a good thing.
I understand completely.
So when we were talking about the pre-interview, where you were telling me about your situation and your almost death, I won't call it near-death experience at NDE, although if there is anything that happened in an NDE situation and you saw something, I'd love to hear about it. But if you can just start by telling me a little bit about that situation, we can go from there.
All right. So I was in the Dominican Republic with my mom and my brother, and we had started renting these mopeds and tooling around the grounds of the hotel resort complex we were staying at when I got hit head on by a dump truck. And, I wasn't wearing a helmet, and, I broke my leg in a couple places and broke my cheekbone and, spent a week in hospital down there and had to have multiple surgeries to, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And, and after that, it took me really about a year before I could actually walk again. And for somebody at the age of 14, that is not a time where you want to be laid up and sitting around all the time,
So as a 14-year-old vacationing in a different country, you now find yourself lying in a hospital bed. How did you amuse yourself? What did you do with the extra time, with the time that you had?
For the week that I was in the Dominican Republic recuperating, mostly, to be honest, I slept a lot. I woke up 3 days after the accident. I was out for a long time, and I would wake up, I would chat with my mom who was there with me. I would eat a bit of food, and then the pain meds would wear out, and I would hit the button, and the nurse would come in and give me a shot, and I would go back to sleep for a while. So, I spent a lot of time just out of it and recovering.
So what do you think about that situation? Because I know I had a similar situation when I was 22. I was hit by a car crossing the street to catch a train to get to work. And I had to really look deep inside myself to find the strength to keep going when the doctors told me, hey, listen, you may never walk again. At 14, I could imagine that is a heavier weight, especially in a foreign country. What did you do? Where did you go to find that strength to let you continue?
Well, I'd always been a metaphysically inclined person. So, at 14, I was already reading tarot cards. I was already meditating through doing martial arts. And, I was already reading, magical texts of one sort or another. And, so some of that stuff really certainly carried me through my ability to meditate and focus, a lot of the breathing that I'd learned through doing martial arts and stuff like that. And then it really, beyond that sort of initial little bit, it really just awoke in me this massive hunger to understand everything. And so I really just kind of came out of that time really just digging in and really starting to realize that I needed to understand everything about the nature of the universe, creation, and why everything was the way it was.
And where did you, what did you decide? I mean, I know that sounds like a really open-ended, okay, we're going to be here for 3 months just talking about this, and believe me, I love this topic, so I can be here for 3 months. But for the sake of a 30-minute show that we got going here, what was your aha moment in that situation?
Well, so I had already been reading Aleister Crowley And Aleister Crowley was a sort of Victorian era magician, astrologer, card reader, and all that kind of stuff. And his sort of central premise was anchored around this phrase, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And what he really meant by that was not what some people take it as, hey, just go do whatever, but you have a reason for being here. There's a purpose for your incarnation. And, it was the premise in that book, as it is in other places, that you could find out what that was. And then you could continue to live that afterwards. And so, for me, it really became this sort of driving purpose of, all right, why am I here? I'm going to figure it out. And, figuring it out, or figuring out parts of it leads to bigger questions, which leads to figuring out more of it. And, it starts this journey that, it really continues for the next 30 years of my life.
So what did you figure out when you were 14? At 14, what did you say, this is why I'm here for?
Well, I don't think I figured out what I was here for in a way that I could sort of articulate. But what I realized was that, can I swear on this show?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
That basically most of what was going on in society was complete bullshit, right?
Okay.
There was this educational system where you couldn't really, at least in my experience for the most part, have solid conversations about anything that was deep and real because it wasn't on curriculum. There was this sort of economic system which was based on privilege and power and sustaining and acquiring power through money and other things. You had everybody who was living all of these double standards of do as I say, not as I do. Oh yeah, we're the usual kind of criticisms, right? We're good Christians, but then talking trash about poor people and why they are undeserving and they should just get on with life like they did. All these kinds of things, right? And so what I really realized at 14 was that there was this sort of hypocrisy and misalignment that was going on in a lot of the culture around me. I realized that I could get out of that. I realized that I had perspectives that led out of that. And I knew that if I pursued that, then I could get to something that was real, something that was true, with a capital T sense.
So it gave you a sense of the world being bullshit because everybody's not being congruent. They're saying one thing and they're doing another.
Yeah.
At the age of 14, and this is remarkable to me, you were able to tap into your as I think Tony Robbins calls it, your personal power, to say to yourself, hey, I have the ability to not live in this box, to go beyond it and to live a congruent, passionate life that's going to serve me and bring value to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of coming out of that, I moved further into being an artist. I not too long after that, or maybe right around that time, I discovered because I was living in a small town in the 80s, right? So the popular culture was all like classic rock or 80s metal, like it was all that kind of stuff. And I discovered punk rock and, sort of the history of punk rock and that piece of culture. And, all these things basically pointed back to me and said, yeah, just do it. Just do things. Just get out there and explore and make stuff and try things,
So out of the punk rock movement, who's your favorite band?
I'll tell you, I've been listening to a lot of GBH again. I really enjoy GBH a lot. Their album, especially their album "A Fridge Too Far," has been getting a lot of play on my devices these days.
Very cool. So your punk rock sensibilities, and I know during the pre-interview you used that term also when I asked you what it was about you, where'd you find the strength, and you just went, it's my punk rock sensibilities, or you may have dropped an F-bomb when you said it. I don't remember. But that's really interesting that it also led you to be more creative. And how would you say the creative parts of you folded in or magnified the more metaphysical areas of your life, and they sort of came together? How does that work in your life?
I mean, back then I got really drawn into things like surrealism and all that kind of era of artists, Dali and stuff, yeah. Because they were playing with that hypocrisy, that duality, that ridiculousness of the world, right? That the world at its core is kind of a ridiculous place at times, and we can engage that and explore that. So, I mean, I made a lot of surrealist art when I was in high school,
Cool.
and then I went to art school and kind of got lost in postmodernism for a long time. The art school I went to was all centered around that, and while I learned a lot about thinking critically there, I didn't really find my place with it. But over time, the expression of myself and my art and my identity, I do a lot of ritual which involves drawing self-portraits of who I want to be or how I want to be or what it is that I'm working on invoking into myself as a way of sort of leapfrogging myself into the future. It started with this portrait where I did this drawing of myself as my ideal future being. And then I was like, well, that's too far. And so I went back and sort of drew intermediary steps until I felt like I got where I wanted to go with that.
So you sort of do affirmation work and goal setting work, but you do it in a visual medium. That's really wild. I never heard of that before.
Yeah. It's something that I do with other people too, where I do spiritual portraits of them to help them get where they want to go. So, yeah.
So does that tie into your tarot work as well? Do you combine those?
Yeah, it's all one thing, right? Like this is one of the, because after I had that accident, I basically went and read everything. I mean, I lived in a small town. I read everything in the library that was philosophy, psychology, religion, anything that I could get my hands on, and at the school library or at the public library. What I realized over time, and what continues to be true for me is there's no real distinction between any of these things for me. It's all a matter of what's helpful in this moment. Are we going to talk about, cognitive biases, or are we going to talk about a person's psychology, or are we going to, pull a surrealist, almost Zen master awakening moment with a person, or are we going to make art about it? And all of those things are viable and valuable options that all exist as equals with each other.
I agree with you. I say that if there is a box, blow it up, and most of the time there is no box. Do what makes you feel comfortable. Do what makes you feel whole, especially if you're getting your message out. It doesn't matter as long as you're being true to yourself and you're using the gifts that the universe has bestowed upon you to take you there.
Yeah. And, and that's where, we go back to that old maxim, know yourself, or, finding your true will. I mean, it really becomes about understanding the real essence of who you are, away from all the sort of ebb and flow of life, and then how that interacts with the world, right? Because the more you can come to understand that, the better you can make your decisions about what you're going to do and whether this box serves you 100%, in which case, love that box and keep good care of it, right? And if it doesn't serve you, then find out why and, blow it up or move to a different place or whatever, right? Like, it's one of those things. The problem for many people is there aren't really very many universal answers. Everything is way more ambiguous than people would like to admit or are comfortable with.
Yep.
And that seems scary to many people, yet when you really recognize that it is permission to discover what works for you and then to do that, then it becomes really, truly liberating, right?
Oh, of course. I think part of the issue with that, and the reason that is we're told from a very young age, we grow up in traditional religious teachings, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whatever it is, that there is a right and a wrong. There's a black and a white. We're taught through school that there are victors and there are losers, that there are right ways of doing things and wrong ways of doing things. There's the right side of history and the wrong side of history. So when people start looking for the answers themselves, if they can find the passion and the courage to go look for themselves, like you did when you were 14, that they want that quick Pop-Tart answer. They want that, yes, this is it. And you're absolutely right. There is a whole gray area that the world is. There is no right and wrong. There is no right way. There is only the right way for me or the right way for you. And people want to know that what they're doing is the right way. They want to get patted on the head, so to speak, and told that they're a good boy or a good girl and that they're doing fine. When the truth is, they don't need it. No one is going to pat them on the head You can do what you want. You can make your life the way it is and the way you want it to be. You can design the life and manifest it in any way you choose to. If you want to live on the beach and collect seashells all day, go ahead. If you want to be the captain of industry, go ahead. They're looking for people to say, yes, you're right, this is the right answer. And truly, the right answer is the one they come up with for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is absolutely true. And I think that there's also an inherent pitfall in that approach too, right? We have to make sure that we've really taken care of our issues, right?
Oh, yes.
We need to really make sure, because that is absolutely true unless you're just like living out script, or unless you're living, angry at your parents still, or unless you're, brokenhearted about a relationship, or, whatever it is, right? Like whatever that baggage is that we all acquire as we live our life, right? Because let's be honest, life is not easy for anybody generally. And, for some people, it's obviously super difficult. And if we're gonna set out to do what we want with the world, we need to really take good care to make sure that we're clear, to make sure that we've resolved our history and that we're not being influenced by it. Because otherwise, we just run around, being triggered by everybody. They're also being influenced by this cultural, personal, whatever historical baggage, right? So there's this sort of system where the system itself has its own momentum. People's history has its own momentum. People are endeavoring to make free will choices in that mix. And depending on how clear they are within themselves will really determine how truly free that is or isn't. It's very complicated to sort of say one way or another that we're free to choose, or that we can't do anything about it, and that we just have to live what's going on, because it's really neither of those. It's back to that thing. It's way more ambiguous and sort of complex than we might be able to even really conceive of.
We have free will. We can create our lives the way we want. We can manifest our existence the way we want. But at the same time, events are going to happen. Yeah. And we're going to respond and react to that. But we can control how we think about those events. I mean, you with your car accident, me with my car accident, we could have looked at that car accident and said, well, screw it, my life is over. Why do these things always happen to me? I can't believe that I was just starting to do these things and now everything is taken away from me.
Yep.
But you chose to look at it as, okay, let me explore life. Let me find out what the underlying reasons for why everything happens. And it opened up your entire world. So in that case, I do believe in free will. I find this also prevalent in like the law of attraction, which I'm sure you, being metaphysically inclined, having your own store, reading tarot, that you're very well aware of the law of attractions is out there. And of course, with the book The Secret, it's blown up all over the place.
Yeah.
But what people think of the law of attraction is, they just wish upon a star and it happens.
Yeah.
I have a friend, she's a very dear friend of mine, and she's always said that she doesn't understand how the law of attraction became so popular so fast, because it is the hardest damn modality to actually work with, because you have to take ownership of everything. You have to say, this is mine. I am going to create it. I am going to do what's necessary. I am going to sacrifice in order to make my dreams come true. There is so much work that goes behind it. It's surprising that people have actually latched onto it and that it is grown, because it is the hardest thing to do. This podcast grew out of my wanting to make money doing what I love. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a way that I'm hoping to promote my business and monetize in a way that I can pay my bills and do what I love. But at the same time, I had to figure out, how do I want to bring value to people? And I decided that the podcast, interviewing people who are passionate about their lives, people who have overcome challenges and come out the other side better, who wanted to share their tales and could help empower and inspire people who are listening to this, would be the way to go for me. Yes, it's hard. The question should not be, is it hard? The question is always, is it worthwhile? How badly do you want it in your life?
Yeah. Well, and I think my challenge with the secret and the sort of power of positive thinking kind of stuff that is often around is it also really negates what's actually going on for people. It negates privilege. It negates the, the burden of history on certain groups and, these kinds of things. And, it is true that if we can align ourselves to see the possibilities, we can open up to many things, and maybe even, as you say, everything.
I will definitely agree with you there. There is a certain amount of entitlement that goes along with people who are currently teaching the law of attraction, because they're teaching it essentially to these same people that they are. They're not going into the inner cities. They're not going into the LGBTQ communities. They're not going into poverty-stricken areas where you really have to dig deep and do the hard work to change their mindsets. Mm-hmm. If you can go and take the law of attraction and you go into the South Bronx and you teach it to those people, the first hurdle you're going to have to get is to get those people to buy into it, to really show them that the mindset can be changed.
Yeah, and it also, you get into this question of, so you can change your own mindset and you can open up your possibilities in a variety of ways, but at the same time, you also can't change, like, just by changing your power of positive thinking isn't going to change people who think negatively because of the color of your skin or your orientation or whatever. So those people are going to continue to run against that in society in a way that is a permanent drag on their system, right? Their approach to living life. And it's something that, I don't think that, certainly I can't really even understand, never having lived it myself.
The only thing that you can do is provide people with the tools and the understanding that, look, the outside world is going to think of you what they will. They're going to judge you because of your color of the skin, because of your sex, because of your gender orientation, because of how much money you have, because of how beautiful you are, because of how smart you are, because of the way you talk and the way you dress. That's the outside world. The only thing you can hope to do is build enough self-confidence in the person, give them enough tools and enough confidence in themselves that they will always look inward. So when they do get battered by the world, when those winds start to buffet them, they can go inside to protect themselves like a turtle in the shell and weather the storm so they don't get beaten down.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you're absolutely right. The world is going to look at you and they're going to judge you. The way the world works, whether they love us or hate us, has nothing to do with us. And we have to stay true to ourselves. And sometimes that's easier said than done.
Well, and I think that if we're going to work with people to help them, evolve, and, whether we're going to use Tony Robbins' personal power or we're going to say, alignment with their destiny or who they truly are, or what I like to say is to bring the fullness of themselves into the world. I think that when we're working with people, one of the things that I've really come to believe is that we need to really make sure that we're listening to these people too, right? Because when we're helping other people, and I think about the people who helped me the most, right? They were never the people who were didactic or, putting out something super intensely. They're the people who are like just kind of, lobbed a little Socratic question in at the right moment, be like, what do you actually think about that? And I think that there's this way in which we can be present with people. And, especially if you're going to work, as a coach or as a reader or, any of those kinds of things. I think that learning how to elicit the information and the wisdom that the person has already and present it to them in a way that they can see it and recognize that it came from them, right? And it's not to say that there aren't times where handing something that is, purely external to somebody is not also useful, but the better we can get at sort of helping people understand where they are, then we can really help them see where they want to go and where, back to our, the good sides of the law of attraction, where a shift in mindset might be helpful, where reframing might be helpful, where just saying, hey, you know what, I've been hitting my head against this door and now I'm just going to leave it alone and go find a different one, might be helpful, right?
That is always going to be a better way of helping people, letting them come to their own answers, to their own greatness, to their own beliefs.
One of the things that I'm most excited about that I've done in sort of the last year or so was I actually created a deck of cards, which is a deck of 90 questions. And so each card has a question and some artwork that kind of supports it. It's great because where you feel stuck, you shuffle this up and you pull one and it'll pop a question at you like,
I love that.
What isn't yours to pick up? How far is far enough? And there are questions that are generally open-ended, but they brush up against those kinds of ways in which we trap ourselves with our own thinking, or we've trapped ourselves with an old story or our inherited baggage or whatever. And so they can kind of create this openness that can then help people sort of continue to be like, oh, wait, that in fact is not mine to pick up, or hell yeah, that is mine, I better pick that up, or yeah, I'm going to step right into this and I've been waffling. There's so many variables as to how people might find their answer, but the questions can absolutely just kind of crack something open a bit and give people this different perspective.
That's a fantastic deck. How did you come up with the idea to create that deck?
I was wanting to do daily drawings to start, kind of upping my skill again as I was working towards making another deck that I'm still working on. I decided that I would start doing some drawings and posting them to Instagram. And so when I got about 20 or 30 of them done, I was looking at them as a whole and thinking, these are really good. I think I'm going to make a bunch of them actually and print them.
Very cool. Have you had any feedback on the decks where people have said to you, hey, this has really opened up my mind and it changed my direction and it gave me guidance when I needed it?
Yeah, for sure. I also get a lot of direction where people kind of look at me with this look where, like, because I have a sample deck out in the store, right? And, people look at the deck, draw a card, and then look at me as if they've been found out, I'm in the process of having it translated into Chinese, and it's going to be published in China as well, hopefully this year. So
very cool.
Yeah.
A lot of people have had situations, they're going through challenges, they're looking for answers. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who is right now struggling to get to that next level or to learn more about themselves?
So I think that one of the biggest things that I think is helpful in terms of like learning how to continuously grow in life is to really work to stop the process of being relational to other people and other ideas in your decision, right? It's so easy to be like, well, I could never do that because my mom would be upset, or, I could never do this because, this person wouldn't like it, or I was raised differently and it's not acceptable. The longer that we live our lives and the more we kind of keep going back to defining ourselves relationally, and this is both, can be angrily too, right? It could be like, screw you all, I'm going to show you guys, this is bullshit. None of that stuff helps, right? So the question that I would say for people is, if you were completely free to do what you wanted right now, what is that thing? What would it be? As long as we're living this sort of engaged relational decision-making process, we're more likely to stay stuck than we are likely to free ourselves.
That is some wonderful advice, and it's really what I try to do and what I try to get other people to just live your life and don't worry about anybody else. Because if you're living life by other people's expectations, you're never going to be in control of who you are and what you could achieve.
Yeah, and and if the people around you have crappy expectations,
well, yeah, that's another thing.
Sometimes it's time to make a difference,
Yep, they say that we are the combination of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So we have to be very, very careful and very, very aware of who we are spending our time with. Are they dragging us down or are they building us up? I do want to give you an opportunity, Andrew, to talk a little bit about your store or your blog or whatever else you want to give a plug to right now and talk a little bit about.
Cool. So I do a few things that people might be interested in. One is I have a store for spiritual stuff called The Hermit's Lamp. And that is both physically a store in Toronto. If you happen to be up in Canada and want to come visit, I love it when people come visit. But we're also online and we ship everywhere. So that's something that people certainly might be interested in. And, we were talking in our conversations about these sort of magical portraits where I tap into my vision from kind of my full eternal self, looking at other people and make artwork for people. And, that's something that's available on the service page of my website, which is, funnily enough, thehermitslamp.com. So pretty easy to find. And, you can go and check some of those out and see, and maybe they'll awaken something in you just by looking at the examples. Or maybe you want to check one out and get one done yourself. I always really enjoy that kind of work because it's so helpful to have non-rational or non-linear ways of working with ourselves, so that when we get stuck in our own cognitive issues, we can be like, wait, I can feel my way out of it through artwork. I can be inspired through, music and other things. And this is one of the things that this offering is about for people.
Cool. And Andrew, I do want to thank you for spending some time with me today. It was a great conversation. I loved it.
My pleasure, Gary.
It went, as most of these conversations are going, not where I expected to go, but it was wonderful in the same way.
Excellent.
So I just want to thank you. And once again, why don't you give the website for the Hermit's Lamp?
Sure. So it's thehermitslamp.com, and you can find all of the services as well as all the shopping and the online classes and stuff are all there, all in one spot, as well as my podcast.
Wonderful. And plug the podcast while we're at it.
So I started this podcast a few years ago because I had this question: why is it some people change and some people don't? And so I decided that I would ask people, tarot readers who had huge depths of experience, that question and see where it went. And so I started with that premise. And then over the years, it's evolved into conversations about living a life as a spiritual person, how to be authentic, how to relate to the world, how to understand spirit and divination and magic and all of these kinds of possibilities. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. And they can find that either at your website or probably on iTunes, right?
Exactly. If you search The Hermit's Lamp in any podcast server, you will most likely find me there.
Fantastic. So, Andrew, I want to thank you for spending time. Folks, if you're in Toronto, drop by a store. If you're not in Toronto, drop by thehermitslamp.com. Listen to the podcast, get yourself some stuff, and I'm sure that they could also sign up to get a tarot reading from you online, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Phone and Skype anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you very much for the time today. It was a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure we'll talk later.
Thanks, Gary.
Wow. Now that was some really deep conversation. I love those kind of conversations. I love the kind of talks that are esoteric and metaphysical and deep in nature. The kind of talks where you go right down the rabbit hole. I love spending time with Andrew and talking about those things, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to it, folks, and that it gave you something to ponder, some food for thought as you go throughout your day, wondering, what is free will? Why am I here? What purpose do I have? And how could I contribute to the greater good of this world? I also love the fact that Andrew created a deck of questions to spur on those thought processes, those deep questions within ourselves, so we can find the answers for ourselves. Having a coach is wonderful. Having people that you can turn to and help you out is great. But really what truly matters is how it feels for you, and living your life the way you choose to, manifesting your life the way you want it to work for you. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So until the next episode, folks, follow your dreams and passions and manifest the life you choose.